Hello everyone, Resonance here, and today I have another tutorial video for you guys. This time we'll be covering the more advanced concepts of Age of Empires 2, such as choosing what units to build, how to counter your opponent's army, as well as how to ensure your economy is as strong as possible. If you are new to the game, you might want to check out some of my other Age of Empires tutorial videos first. There's a link to a playlist of those in the video description below. Regardless, if you have a basic understanding of the game, you should find the information presented in this video to be very helpful in improving your level of play and understanding of the game. I often get asked, how can one defeat certain types of armies, like the infamous Celts siege onagers and halberdier combination, or the classic Britain's masked longbowmen? During this video, I'll be going over how you as a player can choose the right units to win any battle. Now before we begin, I need to clarify that this is actually a post-commentary of a match that you're about to watch. I recorded it from my perspective, and now I'll just be talking over the replay. This was a 1v1 match on the map Black Forest. I'll be playing as the Celts this game, and the random guy who joined my lobby chose to play as the Saracens. Alright, without further ado, let's jump straight into this. I'm going to start by explaining the early game first. What type of things do I do to get an edge over my opponent? Well, for starters, I make sure that my town center is never idle. At the very start of the game, I select my town center and I immediately queue up my 4 villagers, and then I start working on my 2 houses right off the bat. The most important thing that you can do to improve your level of play is to ensure that your town center at all times is either researching a technology or creating a villager. The only time that you're not going to want to be creating villagers really is, well, when you have enough. And how many is enough exactly? Well, in general it'll be about half of the max total population of the game. So this was a 300 population game, so I'm shooting for around 150 villagers. And if it was a 200 pop game, we'd be shooting for around 100 villagers. Now, the thing is that number is dynamic, of course. It's based on your needs. So how many villagers do you need? The correct answer isn't necessarily half of the max population. The right answer is really however many that you need to be able to constantly sustain troop production. So, if I'm making, a ton of war elephants, they're going to cost me a ton of food and gold. I'm going to need way more than half the max population of villagers to be able to sustain that. And that also goes to how you should assign your villagers. Remember that your villagers are truly dynamic. You can send them wherever you need them. If I'm making, mass war elephants, I'm not going to need a ton of, stone, for example, and I'm not going to need as many lumberjacks as I normally would. I will, however, need an amazing, absurd amount of farms if I want to continue that production. So, really, when you're producing an army from several military production facilities, like you've got a bunch of barracks, a bunch of siege workshops and whatnot, when I'm building guys, if I'm still running out of resources, that means I need more villagers. So that's the thing. I think that's the biggest, most common mistake that players make, I see, is that their town center is idle a lot and they never really get a strong economy. Most of the matches that I win, I basically win before any of the combat even starts, because my economy is just that much stronger than my opponent. It might seem that, having that many villagers, 120 in a 200 pop game might seem like a lot, but in a team game, a really good chunk of those will actually be trade cards. You'll probably need somewhere around, really however many trade cards you need to, again, continue your troop production, but you'll probably have around maybe 30, 40 trade cards. It might seem absurd, but it's very, very important. Because the general idea is that, when I was starting out in this game, I used to think that, oh, if I make too many villagers, I need that population for my troops. Well, the person who has the stronger economy is the person that's going to win basically every battle. Because when I have more villagers than my opponent, I can just simply recreate my army much quicker, and then I can basically just overwhelm him. So it doesn't matter if my opponent has a bigger army initially, because my army never dies. So the early game, really, the Dark Age is all about setting up a foundation, your economic foundation for the rest of the game. What you do in the Dark Age really sets the tone for the rest of the match. So, when should you advance to the Feudal Age? This is another important concept. It depends. It depends on what your game plan is. If you are trying to go for a fast Castle Age, you want to get to the Castle Age really quickly, overwhelm your opponent perhaps with some of those really powerful knights, cavalry archers, or whatever you want, or you're just trying to go for a fast Castle Age so that you can transition into an economic boom of some sort. You want to get at a bunch of town centers, a bunch of villagers, you want to get a really strong economy, and then just overwhelm your opponent. Well, if you want to go for fast Castle Age, you're going to want to linger in the Dark Age longer than you normally would. You're going to want to get 27 villagers, and then you're going to want to click up. Now, if you were going for Like, if you wanted a quick feudal age and you wanted to go for some feudal age aggression, then you're going to want less villagers. Because, again, you have to remember what the goal of your specific strategy is. If I'm trying to go for a feudal age rush, if I want to go for archers or something and try and take my opponent out of the game, harass this economy, then what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to get to the feudal age as fast as possible to get as much damage done as possible. But if I'm trying to go for a fast castle age, think about it this way. Why do I want so many extra villagers? Because when I'm advancing to the next age, that takes several minutes, and during that time I can't create any extra villagers, so all the villagers that I have during that time are all the ones I'm going to have. And they're going to be the ones that are gathering resources. So while I'm advancing to the feudal age, if I have 27 villagers instead of like 21, then that means that I have 6 more villagers that are gathering resources in all of that time, and it adds up. This allows you to stockpile resources, a lot extra, surplus. That way, when you get to the feudal age, you can basically just immediately advance to the castle age. You can put down your blacksmith, you can put down your market, and you can just immediately go up to the next age. If you were trying some sort of bizarre cheese strategy like the Fast Imperial Age, which I have a couple videos on which you can also check out if you're interested, then you're going to want even more villagers and you're going to want to linger in the Dark Age forever. Because again, that way you're stockpiling more resources. So those are the kind of things that you want to keep in mind, is that your Dark Age really does set the tone for the rest of the game. Another thing that's important about the Dark Age is, should you take gold and stone or just ignore it entirely? The vast majority of your villagers should be on food in the Dark Age, almost all the time. You're going to want a decent chunk on wood, as you can see. I've got like 3 on wood right now. But should you take gold or stone? It depends. You have to think of your goals. If you're going for a fast castle age, it most certainly makes sense to try and put like 2 gold miners, relatively early on the Dark Age, probably around maybe 20 population, something in that range. You're going to want about 2 gold miners there, that way you get your solid 200 gold by the time you're ready to advance. So, in that case I'm going to want some gold miners. But if I'm going for a super duper fast feudal age, or if I'm going for like a galley rush or something like that, another thing that you want a fast feudal age for, in addition to a flush, is you're going to want basically nothing on anything but food and wood, and very little on wood even at that. Well, except for a galley rush, you're going to, want some fishing ships, so you'll probably have a couple extra villagers on wood, but it really will slow down your feudal age time if you're investing in gold for no reason. So you have to think of your what your needs are. Especially in the case of a galley rush, is that you're not going to need the gold necessarily right away. Galleys don't cost that much gold. So that once you click up to the feudal age, like once you start advancing, that's when you can start putting villagers on gold. But otherwise, you're going to want to wait, and put almost everything on food. If you do it right, and your town center is never idle, and you have almost every villager on food with maybe like 3 to 4 on wood, something in that range, again, you can adjust it to meet your needs, you will be able to advance when you're finished with your second boar. So that's important to keep in mind when you're doing feudal age aggression. Now, in this video, in this particular match, I'm going for a fast castle age, as you can see here. I'm waiting until I have 27 population right now, and I'm going to click up to the feudal age at this point. Now, I have my economy set up in a way that, as you can see, I've got almost 200 gold right about now. By the time I get to the feudal age, I will have 200 gold. I will be very, very close to 800 food, and I will have just enough wood to put down my blacksmith and my market. Through practice, you will be able to get it right, and you'll be able to balance your villagers between the resources accordingly. But when you're learning the game, really what you have to do is just move your villagers from point A to point B, whatever you need. You should never really be floating a ton of one resource. If you watch any of like the top-rated players in Age of Empires 2, you will see that for the most part they really don't float that many extra resources. As the game drags on, if you are floating if you have like 5,000 extra wood and you have nothing of anything else, do yourself a favor, take some of those lumberjacks, put them on something else. That makes a massive, massive difference. If I had $1 for every time I played a match against somebody and they're floating like several thousand extra wood, and they can't afford to create knights or whatever, I always win those matches. I would be very, very rich in that case. So don't do that. Your economy is dynamic. Send your villagers where they are needed. Another thing that's important, and no matter what you do, remember, we're trying to get to this goal of like half of the max population, like 100 plus villagers ASAP. As soon as possible, we want to get to that point. How are we going to get there so quickly? We are going to make multiple town centers in the Castle Age. I see players do this all the time, where they wait forever to build extra town centers in the Castle Age, or they just straight up don't. And if you're doing it from one town center, as opposed to me, where I have like 4, I'm going to get to my maximum number of villagers much, much, much quicker. and then I'm going to be in a much more commanding situation. Now, obviously, if you're going for like a night rush or something like that, putting down the town center immediately is not your priority, but you do want to get out several extra town centers. Now, there's no point, of course, in building like 3 right off the bat when you hit the Castle Age, if you can afford it for whatever reason, because you probably don't have a strong enough economy to sustain villager production from each of those town centers. So, you know, you're going to start with like 1 extra, and you're going to tack on a couple of them. Usually, I would say I have 4 extra town centers for a total of 5 by the time I am basically up to the Imperial Age. Now, you'll see here that I do a little bit of force dropping off. I tell my villagers to gather in the town center. I drop off some of my foragers, so that way I can advance to the Castle Age. I'm set up for a pretty good Castle Age time here. We're going to be around, you know, 1630 in that range. It's a pretty solid Castle Age time. And you'll notice that my economy right now is very, very heavy on wood. I'm putting a bunch of people on wood right now. I've got an extra lumber camp coming down even. Why? Because, again, I'm adjusting my economy to meet my needs. I know that when I hit the Castle Age here, I want to get at a bunch of extra town centers, right? And what do town centers cost? 275 wood. This is ridiculous. I'm also going to need a ton of wood for farms because I am basically out of forage bushes. I have hunted my deer, I've hunted my boar, I have no choice. I have to build farms now, so... Again, I'm moving my villagers between resources. If I run out of gold at some point, I'm going to put villagers on gold. It kind of makes sense, you know? And then, of course, I'm going to get double bit axe, I'm going to get horse collar. Don't forget your economic upgrades. If you're new to the game and you don't know what you're supposed to research or what buildings you want, just build everything and research everything. That's a good way to start out, and then as you get more experienced, you'll be able to make better use of that. Double bit axe is easily one of the most important economic technologies in the game, and the sooner you get it, the better. Of course, if you're going for like a fast Castle Age, you probably want to wait until you've started advancing to the Castle Age to get double bit axe, but otherwise, double bit axe is a game changer. Wood is a very, very important resource, and it's important to get it out as fast as possible. Horse collar at the mill, also very important. If you research that before you build that many farms, then it really does pay for itself extremely quickly. In terms of wheelbarrow, you want to get that at around 30 to 40 villagers. That's when it starts to become more efficient than actually just producing villagers. Handcart would be like a 60 to 70 villagers type deal. People often really delay wheelbarrow way, way too long. It makes a massive, massive difference. You'd be surprised how much of a difference wheelbarrow makes. When you think about it, if your villagers are able to hold more of a resource before they have to go drop it off, that's less time that they spend walking, and it really, really does matter. It pays off a lot. When you're in these close, sort of high-rated matches, what matters the most is the little things. Little mistakes add up over time, and little efficiencies can really lose you the game. So I'm getting wheelbarrow right about now. Probably a little bit early, but again, another thing to think about here is that I'm also trying to stockpile a little bit of food and wood while I'm working on getting enough for my second TC. I'm putting up my first TC. If you noticed, it's right next to the trees and next to gold. When you're placing your town centers, what you want to do is you want to, if you can, for the most part, always put them next to the trees at least. Your town centers serve as a universal resource drop-off point, so your villagers can drop off any resource at that town center. Now, if you can, also putting it next to a mineral as well as wood, then you kill 2 birds with 1 stone there. That's fantastic. It saves you a little bit of wood. That means you don't have to build another mining camp, you don't have to build a lumber camp or whatever, and then you can still surround your town center in farms. It's all about saving every penny and being as efficient as possible. Another thing that's important that I don't see too many players doing, you'll notice right now I'm rebuilding another lumber camp that's closer to the tree line, and this is huge. This really does lose games, and I see this all the time, where players will have, they built their initial lumber camp right next to the trees like you should, because again, we're trying to be efficient, we don't want our villagers to have to walk too far. They will not replace that lumber camp, and pretty soon their villagers will have to walk a mile from the tree line to their lumber camp to have to drop off that wood. Just building another lumber camp straight up next to the tree line will save you so much time, and it will make your villagers so much more efficient. It really does pay for itself. I would say that you want to build another lumber camp when there's about a 4 tiles or like 3 tile distance between your lumber camp and the tree line. So at all of my town centers right now, what I'm doing is I'm producing villagers at each of them. Essentially right now, since my opponent is in the feudal age, I am getting a huge advantage on him. I'm making villagers 3 times as fast as him, and this advantage is really, really going to add up. Now, why am I going for a fast castle age anyway? I haven't really explained that yet. Well, how did I choose my strategy? Your strategy choice should come from a bunch of factors. Most importantly, the map, and then your civilization. The map is Black Forest, right? So it's super easy to wall. There's only one little choke point between me and my opponent, so it's very, very risky to go for some feudal age aggression because you'll never be able to destroy the opponent's walls. Castle age aggression is most certainly viable, but feudal age aggression, not really going to pay off. It sometimes pays off, it depends on how the map looks, but in this case, I got my wall up pretty early. I know I'm safe. If my opponent wants to go for men-at-arms and try and stab my palisades, I'll just add an extra layer of walls behind that, and then I'm going to be in the Castle Age, he's going to be in the Feudal Age, I'm going to be producing a ton of villagers, and I'm going to mop the floor with him. Now, if it's a more open map, of course, then I recommend, early aggression. A fast Castle Age into a boom like I'm doing right now is super risky. Where's my military? If some knights come my way right now, and this is Arabia, I'm a sitting duck. I have nothing to defend against them, and my poor villagers are just going to get slaughtered. So the other thing is, of course, what your civilization is. Different civilizations excel in different things, but the map is, for the most part, the most important thing, and your position. If it's a team game and you are between your teammates, so you're in the pocket position, as we call it, then you probably want to go for Fast Castle Age, because it's much harder to rush you're the furthest away from your opponents. If you're adjacent to an opponent, and it's an openish map, you probably want to go for some Feudal Age aggression, for the most part. Again, it depends on the map, it depends on the situation, but that's why I chose to go for this particular Fast Castle Age strategy. It just favors Black Forest. So, now that we've covered the economy a bit, again, we shift our villagers onto what we need. We're producing villagers from tons of town centers, and we're making a ton of villagers. Like, we want half of the max population, 100 plus villagers, right? Other things, technologies, of course, give you a huge edge. Doesn't matter how many villagers you have, you don't have double bit X 50 minutes in, or if you don't have wheelbarrow, or you're missing your horse collar, try to get all your upgrades. The least important ones are probably the mining camp upgrades. Those can most certainly wait, whereas the lumber camp is by far the most important. You still want all of them eventually. So I'm putting down more TCs right now, and let's move on to the next topic. Military, military, military. This is huge. I think the biggest thing that players can do to move themselves up from like a sort of like low 1600-ish rating to the next bar is to choose your units correctly. When you are choosing what units to build, the first thing you should keep in mind is your opening, right? Like, what units am I going to build initially? You won't always know what units your opponent is building, and Aoe2 is a game of counters, so ideally you want to build units that counter your opponent's units. But you won't always be able to know what he's building. In this case, this is Black Forest, right? The map is walled off. I don't know what my opponent is building. I only know his civilization, I only know my civilization. And that's actually enough information to make an educated choice here. In the event, of course, that you do know what units your opponent is building, if it's like Arabia and you scout a stable, you see some scouts coming your way, you should make spearmen. Always make the counters when possible, but in the event that you don't know, build your civilization's units that are strong and predict what your opponent is going to build. I am the Celts, right? So my strengths lie in siege weapons, infantry, and then I've got some things like my cavalry is okay. It's not really good, it's alright, it gets the job done. I have decent archers in the Castle Age, so crossbowmen is always an option, but I mean, I don't have arbalists, and I don't have bodkin arrow either. Wait, no, I don't have bracer. Bracer is the one that the Celts don't have. So, going archers as the Celts in the Imperial Age, not super good of an idea. And then we've got, horses, it depends. Now let's think, what is my opponent going to build now that we know what options I have? I've got options. My opponent is the Saracens. What does he have? Well, he's got really good camels, really good archers. His infantry is he doesn't have knights. He has pretty good siege. What can I expect from him? Well, we're probably going to expect some camels or something like that. He is the Saracens, after all. Camels is a decent thing to expect, as well as a ton of archer range units. I mean, that's really what the Saracens excel at, and they're very safe. I could expect to see some arbalists, maybe some hand cannoneers. We could see Mamluks this game, some camels, some siege onagers. So, what does this rule out? Well, it definitely rules out my cavalry line. I really shouldn't be opening up with cavalry against a camel civilization. Camels do counter cavalry. I mean, me going mass paladins seems like a pretty bad idea. He could just very easily make Mamluks, and this plays to his strengths. If I can get away with it, I want to force my opponent to build units that are not optimal for his civilization. And if I'm going for paladins, which is already, my paladins are not very good. I don't have bloodlines, I don't have plate barding armor, so I'm missing some armor, I'm missing some health. it's already not optimal for me, and then I'm shifting my opponent into a type of unit that he excels at already. I'm shifting him into Mamluks or his ridiculous HP heavy camels. So screw that. We're not making paladins this game. So what should we make? Well, knowing that he's probably going to make a ton of archer range units, and I can expect some siege workshop stuff, I'm thinking we should go siege onagers and halberdiers. I know he's going to have some swarm of mounted units, probably. He is the Saracens, so halberdiers are just a general all-purpose style deal here. Siege onagers very, very strong against all of his ranged units, and they should make short work of most of his siege. Now, on the off chance that he does send in a bunch of bombard cannons or something like that, or he has no camels, we can always adjust this overall. But this is a safe opening. Why is my opening safe as well, with siege onagers and halberdiers? Why is this good? Why am I not just making siege onagers, right? Or why am I just not making halberdiers? We're making two types of units at a minimum, for the most part, when we choose our opening army. Why? Because you want to cover the counters to your units in advance. Again, we're trying to predict our opponent here, and let's think of it this way. I know what units are strong for my Civ. I really excel with my siege weapons. Onagers are ridiculous with the Celts. So I want to make onagers because that's what they start with. I don't know what my opponent is building. I want to make onagers. Onagers are hilariously weak to fast-mounted units. Well, how am I going to deal with that? Halberdiers are very strong against fast-mounted units, so they seem like natural allies. What are halberdiers weak to? They are weak to ranged units. What are siege onagers good against? Ranged units. So they're natural allies. They have great synergy together. They cover each other's weaknesses. And that's what we call a balanced army composition. When you are choosing your initial units, you want to always try and strive to build a balanced army composition. If you are building only light cavalry, that is not a balanced army composition because the weaknesses to your light cavalry are not covered. They can simply be just slaughtered by infantry or light cavalry or camels. But what if you were doing something like, say, knights and hand cannoneers? That's a pretty good opening army composition because if you go with knights, they're pretty weak to halberdiers, but hand cannoneers destroy halberdiers. So, we're covering some of our weaknesses here. Hand cannoneers are very, very weak to onagers, and paladins are extremely good against that. So that's what you want to do. You always want to open with units that your civilization is strong with, and you want to try and cover those weaknesses initially. Then what units should you be building? Well, once you fight your first few battles and you see that your opponent is probably going to be adjusting into something that beats your army, then you want to also adjust your army comp. You're going to need to dynamically adjust, much like how you're going to change where your villagers are in your economy. You're going to want to constantly be changing what units you're going to build to meet the situation and defeat your opponent. So I'm opening up with onagers and halberdiers. How are you going to beat that, right? Like, that's a pretty good combination. They cover their weaknesses pretty well. How do you stop this? Well, first, you have to look at the counters to each individual unit in your opponent's army. So remember, we know onagers are absolutely destroyed by like fast units, like cavalry. They're absolutely destroyed by cavalry, and we know that they're pretty, it depends, they can be defeated by other onagers if you have equal or greater numbers, especially if you have more range, like with the Koreans, if there's something special about your onagers. They're extremely weak to bombard cannons. That's a thing that really, really does matter. They're weak to eagle warriors, things like this we're going to keep in mind. Halberdiers destroyed by basically everything that's melee that's not cavalry. They've got like piss-poor combat stats. So, they're going to die to hand cannoneers as well, any ranged units really, basically all types of siege, minus rams, of course, and like petards and trebuchets, they get destroyed by scorpions, destroyed by onagers. So, what you're going to want to build then is your army composition. To defeat the opponent's armies, you need to build counters to every individual unit in their army. So, even though there's not really a common weakness, because sometimes there will be. If your opponent does not have a balanced army, and he's building, like, paladins and light cavalry, which are two types of units that share many weaknesses to, like, halberdiers, camels, etc. And, the only weaknesses that, light cavalry cover that paladins have is, like, monks. So, your opponent's army is usually not going to have a common weakness. So in that case, what you're going to do is you're going to want to build multiple types of units. So if you're dealing with the siege onagers and halberdiers, you're going to want bombard cannons to deal with the siege onagers, as well as perhaps maybe hand cannoneers or arbalists or something like that. Maybe champions to deal with the opposing halberdiers. Something like that. You're going to need to build two types of units yourself. There's not really always going to be a one-size-fits-all. Sometimes there will be, though, and in that case, you know, by all means go crazy. If your opponent is being silly and he's building only one type of unit, or he's building, like, units that have common weaknesses, then by all means, you know, go crazy, go crazy. If he's just building, like, several types of infantry, then just go hand cannoneers, or, you know, you just kind of roll with it. Now, here's the other thing. What if, like, you can't beat your opponent's army for whatever reason? He has too many longbowmen. How are you going to beat that, right? Like, onagers normally defeat longbowmen, but the guy's got like 1,000,000 of them, so how are you going to destroy those? Or, you know, he has so many longbowmen that your cavalry just die before they get there. Well, you have to also make sure your economy is strong. If you don't have enough villagers, or if you know, to be able to produce, you know, at least equal numbers of troops to your opponent. Yeah, this is pretty funny here. You can see him. I'm trying to put a gate, by the way, and the game just won't let me, so the struggle, guys. I eventually give up and just delete the wall. But anyway, if your opponent has, like, a really, really big numbers advantage on you, stop throwing guys away for no reason. You are not going to be able to defeat your opponent's army if it's like a balanced army composition if you don't have at least greater or equal numbers than your opponent. So, you know, there are tons of times where I see people, you know, tell me they're like, there's nothing I can do against the Celts, onagers, and halberdiers. No, you most certainly can win if you build a balanced army in response that contains counters to my units, but you're going to need a strong economy. You're going to need a lot of guys. Like, if you have only one bombard cannon, you are not going to do very well against my onagers, so make sure your economy is, of course, very, very strong. The other thing that can help you win these battles against a balanced army, which again is always the goal, we always want a balanced army, we never want to make just one type of unit, or we never want our units to not have their weaknesses covered. That's a great way to lose. The other way to try and win your battles is through strong military tactics. You want to be focusing the units with the right units. So, if I have bombard cannons and my opponent has a ton of onagers, you're going to want to make sure that your bombard cannons are attacking my onagers and not my halberdiers. And, you know, micro really comes in handy here. If you're not targeting, like, your skirmishers onto my archers and you're targeting your skirmishers onto my paladins, then your skirmishers are going to do bupkis. Absolutely nothing. So, by all means, make sure you target the correct units, as well as flanking. Like, you don't want to, like, you can send cavalry, for example, to go charge, okay, like, here's a great way to deal with longbowmen. The dude's got a ton of longbowmen, right? You can't seem to get up to him. Build some onagers to deal with his longbowmen, and then punish your opponent for focusing down your onagers. Because ideally, he'll take his longbowmen, he'll blow up your onagers before you even get in range. What if you charge his longbowmen with some light cavalry, or you flank him with some light cavalry? The light cavalry are approaching him, right? And the onagers are also approaching him. What's he going to do? Is he going to shoot the horses, or is he going to shoot the onagers? He can't do both. If he shoots the onagers, the horses are going to swarm him, and he's going to die. If he shoots the horses, then my onagers will make short work of his army. So again, keep in mind that your positioning of your units also matters too, as well. Also, when dealing with onagers, scattered formation tends to help, or staggered formation actually is what it's called. Staggered formation, good micromanagement. I mean, you can see right here my opponent is trying to exploit the minimum range of my onagers, and he's running up into close range here. Didn't work, because again, wasn't in staggered formation, and he didn't really focus down my onagers. So I just kind of made short work of him there. And he just threw away that entire army for free. He really shouldn't have done that. He had like 20 Mamluks, and I had like maybe 50 guys right there. Only engage your opponent when you think you can win the battle. Don't throw away your guys. What if you can't win the battle? What should you do then? Don't fight him, unless you have to. Absolutely don't fight him. If you're in the winning position, you should try and force a fight. But if you're in the losing position, try to avoid them. Try to avoid them like the plague. Raid your opponent instead of fighting him directly. Try and get an economic advantage for yourself. There are plenty of times where I fought like Korean players who have, you know, they've reached critical mass. They've got this Korean death ball full of, you know, onagers, halberdiers, hand cannoneers, bombard cannons. I can't fight it. I can't fight it. That army is incredibly immobile, though. Longbowmen as well are incredibly immobile. I just send some cavalry to my opponent's base and I kill all of his villagers. And then suddenly, even though my opponent has a really, really annoying army, I have a stronger economy than him. I can suddenly outproduce him. He can't replace his army anymore. He's distracted. He's losing villagers. He's low on resources. I can continually throw units at his army, wear him down, and defeat him. Another important thing to keep in mind as well is really how much money you're spending. I mean, when he threw away that army of Mamluks there, that was a ton of gold. Mamluks are like, I think, 85 gold or something like that. per camel, which is a lot of gold. That's a ton of gold that you just threw away there for no reason. And what I like to do usually is I like to be very conservative with my gold, especially in 1v1s. You know, why am I not making champions with my siege hunters? Why am I making halberdiers? Especially considering that, you know, he doesn't have that many mounted units anymore, because I just kind of killed them all. Well, because, again, champions cost gold, and I'm trying to be conservative with my resources. You don't want to throw away units for free, which is another reason why, if you can't win the fight, you don't necessarily want to take it every time. Now, the thing is that, you know, again, this game is very situational, and sometimes you do want to take a fight even if you can't win it. Like, if your economy is stronger than your opponent, for example, because, you know, your opponent can't replenish his guys. So, if you have a stronger economy, you can defeat them. So, just keep all of those things in mind. Remember, we want to balance army composition. We want our units to cover each other's weaknesses. We want to build counters to the opponent's units. We want to look at our opponent's army as individual units and build counters to those. We want to focus the correct units. We want to use our bombard cannons to kill the siege onagers, not the halberdiers. We want to use our hand cannoneers to, you know, kill the halberdiers, not the siege onagers. We want to charge our opponent with cavalry. We want to raid their base. We only want to take fights we can win, ideally, unless we have an economic advantage. I'm gonna go over a couple other advanced tips and tricks, which you probably are aware of if you play this game, but if you're not super experienced, this might be news to you and is incredibly helpful. Some rules to keep in mind. One of the first ones is, if it's a water map, always prioritize the water first. 9 out of 10 times, you know, obviously there's exceptions to all of this, but 9 out of 10 times, if you're like on Mediterranean, or you're on islands, team islands, you know, rivers, the water is super important. It's full of fish. Getting fishing ships out, it's essentially like having a second town center in the Dark Age. You're producing villagers twice as fast as your opponent, in a sense. You're getting all this free food, all this map control. The water is really important. You want to prioritize it ideally. The player who ignores the water will usually lose. Another interesting trick that you should also try is using your buildings as makeshift walls. We're always trying to be conservative with our resources, remember? And if you check out my 1v1 Arabian match that I recently played against one of my viewers, Laxatory, I will put a link to that in the video description if anybody is interested. You'll notice that I'm using my buildings as makeshift walls. I'm including my archer ranges, my blacksmiths inside as walls, and I'm connecting palisade walls with them. Why? Because it saves me some extra wood. And early game, that can really make a big difference, so make sure your buildings are placed correctly. Another thing is castle placement that I see players screw up with all the time is, for the love of God, do not put your castle right up to your walls in Black Forest if your opponent is in the Imperial Age, because it's just trebuchet fodder at that point. Oh yeah, you'll also notice that I'm using my siege onagers to cut through the trees to raid another set, to raid the hidden part of his economy that he put in the back there. Because again, we're trying to put a lot of pressure on him, and I just want to destroy all of his villagers, basically. But yeah, you want to make sure that your castles are not just in trebuchet range. I usually like to put my castles next to my farms in my economy so that my opponent can't raid my bases easily. That way I don't need to keep units behind to watch out for cavalry raids. I have castles here, so if he just goes straight for my farmers, I just ring the town bell and his units are just going to get destroyed. Unless he sends a massive army to my base, which in that case, you know, I'm just going to blow up his base, so castle placement is very important. So also exploit the map to your advantage, of course. Keep in mind where your opponent's resources are. When you're raiding your opponent, you know, don't go straight for his farmers. Go for the low-risk things like his external villagers, the ones that are far away from his base, far away from town centers, like his miners, his lumberjacks. Exploit the map to your advantage. If your opponent has his gold mine at the front of his base, then just pressure that non-stop if you can. If your gold is at the front of your base, of course, you're also going to want to protect that, so keep that in mind. Using siege onagers is also yeah, you can see here, by the way, my opponent, of course, in a typical 1v1 fashion, has unplugged his internet and has disconnected in an attempt to cause an out-of-sync error, so that way I lose rating for even beating him. This is the reason why my rating is not particularly that high, is it's very hard to actually, I guess, legitimately get a win in Age of Empires 2 right now. You know, people will just unplug their internet and whatnot. However, it didn't work here, and he just DC'd, and I got, actually, the victories. That was pretty nice. But yeah, of course he tried that. But yeah, you can use siege onagers, of course, to cut through the trees, do some interesting tactics as well. Again, when in doubt, raid your opponent's economy. And in a team game, the thing you should be focusing is the opponent's trade. If you take out the trade line, you win the game. So if you can sneak some cavalry into the opponent's markets and just destroy them, then, well, you're going to starve the opposing team of gold, and you're just going to win the game. So yeah, I always like to be conservative with my gold, of course, so I like to always supplement my really expensive units like my siege onagers, perhaps my hand cannoneers, my war elephants, my war wagons and whatnot, my paladins with trash units that don't cost gold like the halberdier, the skirmisher, the light cavalry. Another thing, I'm going to cover a couple more concepts before I end this video, and then we're finally going to end it off, is exploit the market. I get a huge advantage over my opponent with that this game. And it's often a way that I win a lot of 1v1s, is that I will go into the market and I will start selling wood and food if my opponent hasn't done that. Because in a 1v1, I don't have access to... sorry about that. I don't have access to a trade line, right? So I have a limited amount of gold. There's only a finite number of gold mines on the map, and relics aren't really going to cover my gold needs. So by selling a ton of food and wood, which I do have a ton of, then I set myself up to a massive gold advantage. I'll basically have 2,000 extra gold that my opponent can't really have. And then he can't really use the market anymore to go sell his wood and food after I've done that to the point where, you know, it's only worth like 14 food and 14 wood anymore. He can't really do that. And as well, you know your civilization strengths and weaknesses, and don't be afraid to adapt. Aoe2 is a very, very dynamic game, so a lot of the things that I tell you in this video, while they apply most of the time, might not always apply. You're going to constantly need to adjust your strategy, adjust what units you build, adjust where your villagers are going, adjust your game plan to meet your needs, meet the growing, changing situation. If your opponent is, going for a fast castle age, right, and you are playing on like Arabia, well, you should go for a feudal age rush in that case. Take him out of the game if he's vulnerable. He hasn't walled up, you know he's going for a fast castle age because you scout his base, you don't see a barracks. You see a ton extra villagers, he hasn't clicked up to the feudal age yet by the time you hit feudal age. Then go and kill him right off the bat. He'll be super vulnerable, he won't have the economy to fight you, and he won't be prepared. Especially if you see your opponent trying to boom on like an Arabia match, like by all means punish him early, punish him, scout your opponent. Of course, Aoe2 is a very hard game to learn. It does take a lot of practice, and really the best way to improve would be to watch your replays. I often recommend that people record, the vast majority of their matches and watch your replay. If you lose, take a look at what you did wrong. How did your opponent win? Where did you go wrong? Are you floating a ton of wood? Were you building the wrong units? Did you let your opponent build up when he was vulnerable? Things like that. Watch your replays, examine them. And of course, I have plenty of other, Aoe2 tutorials on my channel, as well as just Age of Empires videos in general, which watching those hopefully will help you improve your overall level of play. So as always, thank you so much for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. Of course, this tutorial was a suggestion from a YouTube user, so if you would like me to do a video on a specific topic, or you want me to cover, really anything, let me know. Leave a comment below. Leave a like rating. I will read it, and I will see if I can get to it. And of course, I do live stream regularly, and I would love to see you there, and that's when I get to answer a lot of viewer questions. It's also a good way to play with or against me, so if there are specific questions that you have about the game that you want answered, you can either leave a comment or show up to the live stream, and I will try and help you out a bit. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I really do appreciate the support. I've seen my channel grow a lot recently. We've gone from humble beginnings all the way to 6,000 plus subscribers, which is really cool. And my goal, of course, is to always continuously deliver content that you guys enjoy. So, if you want, feel free to leave me a comment and let me know what your favorite video of mine is as well. I always like to hear that. Alright, so thanks again, guys. It's awesome to have you all around. I hope you found this informative and whatnot, and I will see you all in the next video. So, thank you so much for watching, guys. I will see you all next time.